When we talk about trust and leaders, so your topic, how to get leaders engaged, it should start with a humble acknowledgement that leaders, given their career, given their self-esteem, normally overrate themselves and on the level they deliver on trust and psychological safety. And if they start on this acknowledgement, I think that's a good start to have an open dialogue.
Joining us today, Klaus Moosmayer, Chief Ethics, Risk and Compliance Officer at Novartis. Welcome to Insights from the Coalface, elevating leadership beyond the boardroom. I'm Sarah Cole, a former solicitor turned life coach and founder of Cole Forums, the peer support network for CEOs and general counsel. This podcast is your exclusive access to high-trust conversation designed to inspire and empower leaders like you to thrive not just professionally but personally. In each episode, we'll delve into the challenges and triumphs of leadership, offering actionable insights and strategies to help you navigate complexity, foster resilience, and achieve authentic growth. Let's get started, and together, we'll take your leadership beyond the boardroom. Klaus Moosmayer has been Chief Ethics, Risk and Compliance Officer at Novartis since 2018. He was previously Chief Compliance Officer at Siemens AG, where he spent 18 years in roles of increasing seniority. He began his career as a lawyer specializing in white-collar crime. He is transforming ethics and compliance at Novartis through innovation, data, and employee engagement. Klaus led the launch of the company's Code of Ethics and introduced digital risk management systems. A recognized global leader, he has addressed the UN and collaborates with the OECD, G20, B20, and WEF. He also co-founded a compliance leaders non-profit and drives collective action to foster integrity standards within the pharmaceutical industry and beyond. Good morning, Klaus. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Sarah. Hope all good on your side as well.
Yes, perfect here. I'm excited to dig into our conversation. It's been a long time since we've been able to speak, Klaus, so it's lovely to see you. I've been fascinated since we met, and I've never asked the question, but what led you and drew you into this ethics space that you're so passionate about?
Yeah, indeed, Sarah, we have a long journey together. And I mean, as you know, I was a still back then young lawyer in the early 2000s when the corruption scandal hit Siemens, the company where I was employed as a lawyer. And I think always careers are interesting, how you develop careers. This was a career move which was driven by an external impact in the company, the big investigation in Siemens, where I said, look, I want to be part of this. The company changing the culture, building a compliance system which did the best what it can, avoid systematic misconduct in a very, of course, volatile situation back then for the company. And it taught me a lesson, of course, for compliance professionals, ethics risk professionals. Go where you have an impact and take risks. You have to take risks in these situations. And this brought me into our ethics risk and compliance space.
And obviously, having been brought in, maybe by happen chance, did you see yourself immersed in this world as much as you have been, or has it just evolved over time?
Yeah, I think the initial start, the kicker, basically, of course, this you couldn't plan. But afterwards, once you are in, I think every compliance, ethics, risk professional should develop over time, I believe, if you want to become really a leader, a vision, what you want to achieve in corporations, in organizations. By the way, it can also be public organizations. I always say compliance, ethics, risk is not limited, as you know best, Sarah, to privately organized companies. It's also true for NGOs. It's also true for sports organizations, for governments, because the risks and the threats are, I would say, similar. So what I can say, I developed over time a view on how to move from a more reactive approach, which you need to have in a crisis. I mean, you have to act. I said one time, I compare it to a highway road accident. You have to give intensive care. But that's not enough. Once the crisis is over, you have to develop a vision. And I think this was my journey from a holistic prevent, detect, compliance program to get the ethics part in there, then to get the risk and crisis management part there, to come today, which I call integrated assurance for organizations. And this was over the last decades, basically my own learning and journey from a visionary point of view.
Yeah, and if I can just stay for a moment on that integrated assurance point. Look, I remember when I first reached out to you to speak at one of my events, I don't know, back in 2010, sometime around the Bribery Act coming out. Shortly after, you wrote an article about sort of the cyclical approach that you there had in mind. And more latterly, you've been speaking around integrated assurance. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and how it's evolved to this point in your mind?
Yeah, sir. I mean, many compliance organizations started with the anti-bribery efforts, mainly driven, of course, by external investigations. Anti-bribery and to a similar, a little bit limited extent, but also important antitrust topics. So we built their holistic compliance systems as companies. Then other compliance topics surfaced. I mean, the data privacy topic emerged as a really big regulatory topic. Export control issues emerged. Money laundering topics. And the broader the spectrum gets, the more risk topics you see, because the better you get in your analysis on the risks, what are the amplifiers, what are risk topics for companies to come, the more compliance topics you see. And then you have to stop this siloed approach and tackling one compliance silo after the other, because they're all interconnected. One example, anti-corruption, human rights. I mean, when you have a corruption issue in your supply chain, I bet you have also a human rights issue and vice versa. But if this is handled in different organizations in the company, it's difficult to leverage this. So seeing all these compliance topics emerging had to be addressed. I said, look, this has to be a horizontal rather than a vertical approach. And therefore, I came to this integrated assurance topic, which really is for me the big thing top of my mind.
And the other thing that you've written about quite a lot, which maybe weaves into that, is trust. And the Ed Trust Barometer last year claimed that people actually value trust in corporations more than governments. That said, they also came up with a data statistic that AI companies' trust in them fell over 5 years from 61% to 53%. So there seems to be a bit of a dichotomy going on there. What do you think about that? I mean, you've obviously, bearing in mind your integrated assurance perspective, you've also spoken about the importance of building trust. How do they intersect, do you think?
I mean, compliance is often seen, them for risk management, as a very technical, sometimes bureaucratic exercise. And if we miss the cultural topic, the trust topic you just mentioned, Sarah, you don't win over the people. At least not midterm. Again, in a crisis, when you have to put all the controls, all the trainings, all the policies, yes. But when the crisis is perceived over, the people say, well, it's also bureaucratic. I don't trust the system because it takes all double time. So speed to engagement is too slow. And I don't see myself valued as an individual in the company with all this bureaucracy around me. So the trust topic is super relevant. Before I come to this, maybe one word about the Edelman Trust Barometer or report. I think what we have to see is one of the reasons why people maybe trust more corporations is because they are their employer, and the people tend to trust their employer. If not, they would not be in the company, right? You make a choice to go to a company, and then you trust initially an employer. So the good news is there's an initial trust in your employer, in the company you voluntarily decided to go for. And if you talk about ethics, risk, and compliance and assurance, I believe they are a major driver how to maintain this initial trust in companies by understanding the context where the people are working, especially in a global organization. Where is the pressure? Is there a speak up and a listening culture from leadership? Is there the trusted topics taken up if they are raised? it's a formal whistleblower complaint or reporting, or if it's a discussion during a risk workshop, for example. So I would say as a summary, if you only focus on compliance on a broader sense, integrated assurance from a technical point of view, and if you don't focus on a trust and ethics dialogue in a very humble way, you miss out a big thing. And you miss out an opportunity because the initial trust in your employer is there and you have to maintain it.
I think I've heard a lot around the trust topic and being humble in recent months. It does seem to be a recognition of this. And I think I saw that 94% of leaders appreciate that trust is important. But how does that actually manifest itself in the real world? What does that look like from a leader's perspective? Because I'm thinking of my own audience listening to this now. What can they do to demonstrate what they need to in order to give comfort to their employees that they're trustworthy?
Although we are getting to a very sensitive point, Sarah, it's a great question because, to be honest, leaders have to acknowledge in a humble way, that they are biased in their trust perception. We did significant efforts at Novartis on ethical surveys, really deep going surveys. And what we found out is there's an overconfidence in the leaders, C-suite, and also the middle management. They believe, yeah, we deliver trust, we deliver a speak-up culture, we believe other people can raise their concerns. But if you go to the receiving end, to the broader employee base, this looks quite different. There is the concern we are not listened to. There's the fear of retaliation. So I believe when we talk about trust and leaders, so your topic, how to get leaders engaged, it should start with a humble acknowledgement that leaders, given their career, given their self-esteem, normally overrate themselves and on the level they deliver on trust and psychological safety. And if they start on this acknowledgement, I think that's a good start to have an open dialogue in the company.
And with that in mind, I think that's really helpful advice. Is there any other advice you might give leaders who are trying to embed ethics into their company's DNA?
Yeah, first of all, I'm, to be honest, not the biggest fan of this statement, ethics in DNA, because, companies are very lively organisms. They change their M&A activities, mergers, you get different cultures together. So I believe it's an ongoing effort to work on the culture and work on the ethics of an organization. To get it into the DNA, it's maybe a wish, it's maybe a great target, but it's a lot of work. I think the good news is, let's start on the good news. We are in a much better position than maybe 10, 20 years ago. Why? Because there's much more data in companies. And given our approach on digital, collecting feedback from employees, we are in a much richer situation than 10, 20 years ago. We can run the global surveys in companies. We have data in companies. And companies are doing this. So first step is ask for open feedback in a really humble way. And I'm not shying away from the feedback you get. The second thing, which is then not done so good because the first thing is done very frequently by companies, the surveys. The second thing, and maybe more important, is then to act on the feedback. And there where it becomes a little bit difficult. And because I said this before, I believe there's no survey fatigue in organization. There's a fatigue or disappointment by the employees if there is no reaction, no feedback, no follow-up on their statements, on their concerns towards leadership. So when you design feedback rounds, this can be a smaller round table in a country on a global scale, can be a big survey. You have to have a plan what you do with the feedback visibly, because you have to also lead by symbolic actions and show we listen. We heard, for example, retaliation is a big concern. We do the following actions to address the topic. So it's to your question, using the potential we have, getting feedback, and really important to act on the feedback afterwards as a leader.
That's absolutely my experience as well. I'd heard feedback from many, many companies that I worked with that had possibly done some sort of employee engagement survey, but hadn't been seen to be doing anything with that data. And I completely agree. That's when the fatigue really comes in. And so it's more damaging than if had you not asked the question in the first place, because now that you have the answer, what are you going to do with it? So I couldn't agree more. And just on the culture point, I mean, you've worked across many, many geographies, industries, and I've noted that you travel extensively to the different offices at Novartis, for example. How do you think the cultural differences geographically, I'm speaking about now, may impact on the way compliance and ethics programs are implemented?
Yeah, it's a very big question, and still a big debate about the value and the impact of global standards in organizations and local standards, and how should they relate to each other. After many years in the battlefield of ethics, risk, and compliance, my personal takeaway is the following. But this is open for discussion. Be interested in your view as well. Sarah, you have seen a lot of different companies in your career. I believe it's super important to listen and to understand the local context. That's what behavioral scientists have told me. And I'm not a behavioral scientist, but I employ behavioral scientists in my ethics, risk, and compliance team because I believe they really add value. So people act very much on their local context. The pressure, the customary behavior, the local environment leadership has created in the country, in the department. This makes a lot of the decisions, understandably on hindsight at least, which are taken. But this is not speaking against global standards. I truly believe company is only trustworthy if they have global standards, enforce global standards. But when we come to global standards, it starts always for me with the code of ethics. That's for me the constitution of the company, the highest policy you have. Don't develop a code of ethics in the ivory tower in your headquarters. Get the local context in, do crowdsourcing, listen to people where their issues are, reflect their views in the global standard, because then there's more openness for a global standard. But I believe you need global standards in companies, but you have to listen and take into consideration the local context where the people are living. I don't know what your experience after the many years are.
Yeah, there have been many debates about codes of conduct, but I think in essence it should be your culture written down as far as it's possible. And in order to do that effectively, you absolutely have to ask the various sections and cultures within your organization. So that is definitely my experience, and there's been debate about whether it should be translated in every language known to man. And I think, to be fair, I think that's really important because it needs to be as accessible as it possibly can be. Because any block you put to an understanding of your code of conduct is a block to connecting your company's culture with the individuals who work for you. So I absolutely agree. And I think that is one of the challenges facing multinational companies in particular who have got a global footprint, is to really speak to every member across geographical borders. Do you think there are other big challenges that you sort of have on your top priority list right now?
Yeah, for sure. We're living in a time where a lot of changes are happening. And we, for this reason, because I'm also in the integrated assurance framework, driving the risk management for the company, we just have changed, adapted our risk management approach to these challenges. We are used to do risk management, and this includes technical risk as well, of course, in buckets. So what is strategic, operational, emerging, whatever. We are now looking still, of course, at strategic and operational challenges and risk, but we put this in the context of amplifiers. What are amplifiers in our time we are living for the risks and challenges we see? And we learned a little bit from the World Economic Forum and the way how they look at risks in the recent years. And amplifiers are there. Geopolitical, amplifiers. We're living this at the moment every day. I mean, I think everyone understands this quite clearly, the relevance of geopolitical risks for companies which have very practical outcomes in for compliance. For example, also in trade compliance, as one example, on AI and whatever, but also for the reputation of the company, for the role of the CEO. Should she or he take public stance on geopolitical, cultural topics, yes or no? So that's an amplifier on various levels. For sure, the technology journey. I mean, there's no doubt that we are in an acceleration of technology, and we are still not completely clear where this will lead us as human beings, as companies, as societies. Opportunities and risk, that's one of the amplifiers we see on risk and opportunities, technology roadmap, including AI. Of course. Let's not forget climate change. We are living this also every day. We see the impact, and this has practical impact on societies. It has impact on industries as well. I mean, if you look at the pharma industry, the climate change may change disease patterns, tropical diseases, new disease patterns coming out. This may change really very practically the portfolio of medicines we need in the future. And with these amplifiers, societal expectations are changing. You talked about how people look at companies. So maybe companies are more seen as someone who should speak up more often. The CEO should speak up more often. As countries are getting sometimes weaker, companies have, I mean, there's this expectation companies take over on human rights, for example. What originally is the duty of countries to safeguard human rights, but now it shifted to companies. You have to make sure that human rights are complied with. So these are also societal expectations. So geopolitical topics, technology roadmap, climate change, and societal expectations.
Obviously, I've been immersed in this world, listening to what leaders are worried about, and you've hit on every metric that I've heard is front of mind right now. But how do leaders balance the need for business growth against all these regulatory increases, all the factors that you've just mentioned, and also, I'm a subject very close to your heart, innovation, because obviously companies need to innovate to evolve.
Yeah, I I must say, and just coming from the World Economic Forum in Davos, where this was a big topic, indeed, and maybe there for the first time, which gives me again hope. And as you said in our pre-discussion, I'm basically still an optimist. For the first time, I saw a kind of dialogue between business leaders and the regulator, especially the European Commission, that they understand we need a good balance between innovation or growth and regulation. And please don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-regulation. I'm not anti-regulation. I fully understand that we need regulation to safeguard the values we have. And this goes beyond our own company. This has to include the supply chain in a certain way as well. But we need to assure growth and innovation. We need a better dialogue between the regulators and the industries, which also, coming back to your trust topic, Sarah, we need to rebuild trust between regulators and industry. The trust was a little bit lost from both sides, I have to say. And we can address this only together. If you want to leverage AI, but do it in a responsible way, maintaining ethics, there has to be an ongoing dialogue between the regulator and the industry, just to take one example. I hear the commitment, and we also, as an industry, we also have a duty to do the dialogue, to put resources into this, to come to a really a good level of regulation, which is not obstructing innovation and growth for companies.
I think just listening to you, and yes, I loved that you're still an optimist, Klaus, because especially coming from being originally a lawyer, that's really very rare, I find. But there are lessons that you seem to have learned that I think would be quite interesting to the network when you're obviously very collaborative. Your work, volunteer work in the OECD and now in the World Economic Forum. It's just wonderful to see because obviously the voice of business needs to be heard in those forums for decisions to be made that are holistic and balanced. Thinking about um, the lessons that you've learned at Siemens, there must have been rafts of them, given that that you just come out of obviously the investigation. What are the biggest lessons that you've learned in the transformations that you've undertaken in both those companies?
Yeah, I would say the art is, and that's maybe a good food for thought for all compliance professional, risk professionals who are caught into a crisis to work on big topics. Think about what what happens after the legal resolution of the case. And again, the legal resolution of a case is super important. It's a basis to maintain your license to do business for companies, as we all know. But the understanding that the root cause is why systematic misconduct has happened is normally not solved by a legal resolution. It's solved by a midterm to long-term vision in companies to work on assurance and ethics topics. So when we develop compliance systems and risk mitigation, we need to do it with a mid to long-term perspective. The worst what I have seen is the up and downs. Companies, and I was lucky to work in companies like Siemens and Novartis who have a different view, the mid to long term view. Other companies who invest a lot in the crisis, and then if a legal resolution is there, they cut the budget, cut the people, and they say, "Oh, we are out. Everything is fine. We have a great culture. We don't need this anymore." Normally, they pay a high price for this. So that's one thing. Have always the mid to long term perspective as a compliance risk professional in organizations, and test the company if they are willing to invest in this. And then we eventually need more people like you, Sarah. We need people who connect people. We always, because we have so much to do, tend to work in silos in our companies, and we have no time to reach out to discuss. We need to invest, of course, very cleverly on benchmarking, on discussions to get fresh ideas, the famous outside in view. So what you are driving, getting people together, leaders together, exchange ideas, think outside the box. At least reserve 10 or 20% of your time budget to do this as a leader or a compliance professional.
I completely agree. It's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about pulling people together is that's where the magic happens. That's where ideas, innovation, and more often than not, somebody's faced a similar challenge and you can help each other. I think just listening to your biggest lessons, the long-term vision thing is an issue for most of the leaders that I'm speaking with because they have pressures from stakeholders, investors, that they're really looking maybe for more short-term gains. How can you push that agenda, do you think, as a leader in a company that's obviously very focused on profits, frankly?
Yeah, it's a classic. I mean, on the one hand, this short-term quarterly reporting has, of course, also a compliance reason because the regulators want to, and the shareholders and yeah, basically the stakeholders you have there, they want to force you to be completely transparent on a quarterly basis. And then this leads then to reaction. If one quarter is not that good, your share price goes down and you lose confidence of the investors, which especially in an industry which is there for the long term. I mean, pharma, we have cycles of 10, 15 years to research, develop, and if we are successful, submit medicines for approval, 10 to 15 years. Roughly 1 to 2 billion investments, which can be completely lost last minute if the science is not on our side. So to to continuously try to explain this to all of your stakeholders. I believe the stakeholder management will be increasingly not getting easier, to be honest, or given the current situation, but to explain how is your company working? Where do you get the value the value out, the long-term vision, the purpose of the company? Why it's important not to focus only on the next quarter. It's also important, of course, to have the financial rights and the books and records right. Don't get me wrong, but this long-term perspective you can only get by a dialogue with all the stakeholders, which is burdensome, but it has to include the regulators as well.
It sounds like that's a tough conversation, but one that's absolutely essential, really, in order to really give that vision the time and space that it needs to evolve and to impact on the company culture. I think AI obviously is a huge topic which is influencing that tough conversation as well. I'd like to dig in a bit deeper, if I may, to that, because you've spoken widely, obviously, because of how Novartis will be impacted by AI, like many other companies. But thinking about the intersection of AI and ethics, I mean, most recently you did speak about this at Davos, and you've spoken very openly about the revolutionization of the drug discovery and sort of, patent care. So, what are your thoughts around that intersection? Can you share it with the listeners?
Yeah, it's for us a crucial topic because, as you rightfully said, that it has the potential, we have to see, to may have a revolutionary impact on research and development, which is then for the patient the most important outcome, getting faster new medicines for the many, many at the moment not treated diseases. We have thousands of diseases which are not treated at the moment. There's no medicine available for them. And if we are able to cut this 10, 15 years of research development cycles, we could do a lot of good for society and, of course, also for the companies. So that's make or break for the pharma industry, I would say. On the other hand, we are the industry which is the closest to human life and health. We deal with patient data. So there has to be a balance in the use of AI for the innovation and also for the responsible ethical use of AI. And therefore, we invested quite some efforts early enough, already 5 years ago, to come to the first roundtable discussion, including, by the way, external ethicists and experts on principles for our developers, for our researchers. What are principles for the ethical use of AI? Human centricity. Who makes the final decision? What kind of data we use? What kind of consent do we need from the patients to use the data? And this shows already integrated assurance again, Sarah. I believe you can't keep data privacy and AI separate. You have to bring this together. Therefore, we made one organization as a system compliance, which cares about data privacy, digital and AI compliance, because you need also knowledgeable people having data privacy and AI topics basically in the same question and the same answer. You have to explain this also, this need continuously to the people who desperately want to work on fast track AI because they have a very good intent. But you have also to, in the dialogue, to make clear, look, before we start, we need to do a proper risk assessment, including ethical consideration, reputational considerations. But then you have to be super fast. I mean, speed to engagement. You are too slow. You're just circumvented. Let's face it. If you propose there a compliance framework which takes weeks or months to approve a new AI application, the people just will circumvent you. That's how it is. It's how it is. So you have to be fast, knowledgeable people. It's not easy to get them on board, to be honest. Speed to engagement, and also take a certain very much risk-based approach. I mean, you have to take certain risks. But I'm stopping talking, but I'm deeply convinced is the following. We will be judged in hindsight in 3 years from now how we have dealt with these topics today. And all the companies who say, we take care of ethics and compliance in 3 years from now, they make a big mistake, because we will be judged in hindsight. How have we started? And once you have AI in the company, you will not get it out. It's in the company, in the systems. You have to start right now.
And that's absolutely key advice. And I think something that really everyone listening should take on board, because that's how history judges us, right? When there's a big intervention or a revolution of some kind, which clearly AI is, the decisions we're making now will really dictate how that unfolds within our organizations. So thinking about I know that you've obviously had to act with agility, but as you say, you've been in this game for 5 years, which is probably longer than most people who are tackling AI now. So I think I'm right in saying, categorized with a framework of AI risks. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, what that looks like?
It's not rocket science, by the way. And to be honest, the people love to criticize what comes from Brussels, from the European Union, but what we basically did, we started with, as I said, some ethical big frameworks, because the people need to first understand the principle-based approach. And this includes very basic principles like human centricity. If it's about life and health, the human being has to make the final decision, not the machine. Collect the data carefully, don't collect too much what it won't need, and so. And then, and this may sound a little bit simplistic, but how it is, we said, look, we have the European AI Act coming, and it's already now, as you know, the first step is now already in place. And we said, okay, they go for a risk-based approach, and we basically mirror this in our company. So whenever, in practical terms, there's an ask, a request for a new AI application, we follow a risk-based approach. We see, goes this into what the UI Act defines as a no-go area, social scoring, for example, things like this. Are we in the high-risk area? Normally, when patient data and health data is involved. Are we more in medium-risk data? Are we in low data where it's more, on manufacturing, which is also very big for manufacturing platforms, a kind of more agility in manufacturing. So we categorize the application according to this risk framework, and getting then cross-functional teams together, because we need the expertise, of course, from the people who know what they're talking about. And then what is also important, just a practical advice, you have to have one place where you store the application, where you can monitor and follow up, because this is super, agile and volatile. These applications, as you know, AI is a self-learning kind of cosmos. So it's developing. So you have to monitor also the development of the AI application. You have to store the application basically in one place, where you can also audit monitoring, and when the authorities come, can showcase them how you monitor the AI applications, and try to have people in your organization really understand also the content, not only the process. I'm more on the process side. For me, it's difficult, to be honest, not a digital native, to fully understand the content behind, but I need to have people in the organization understand the content as well. So risk-based approach, transparency, what is developed and rolled out, and monitoring, because the AI application of the year 25, said February, will look in practice already different in a couple of weeks or months from now, because it's a self-learning cosmos organization.
Maybe we should add to that list, given what you've said, the right team.
Difficult enough.
Right. Yes. And I feel, just listening to you, the sense of having to be fast-paced, which you mentioned earlier, is absolutely essential as well, because it'll overtake you in the planning. Thinking about this new brave world that we're entering, there are obviously some risks for companies in integrating AI. What do you think are the, let's say, top 3 risks, as far as you're concerned, of doing that?
Yeah, I think the number one risk is definitely that you just miss out the big opportunity. And as I said, Sarah, in pharma, it's clearly for us not so much the off-the-shelf Copilot, uh, which we also applied a very broad range on the AI literacy to make the people really empowered. But for us, it's a research and development. If we miss out there, that's really a big thing. Second, I would say talent, as you said. Wow, that's a competitive market on the people who really understand, and the same side on the people who are on the gatekeeper side, or the risk and compliance side. Also, there are huge talent scarcity, I would say. And then third, I would say it's to be really in real time aware how fast development goes. Because if you, especially, I mean, also from the gatekeeper point of view, I have now to take this position. If you disconnect, if you don't see the new challenges coming there, if you're not close enough to big ethical topics, and I would say one of the big ethical topics is again always who makes the final decision on a crucial point where there's a huge commercial, reputational, scientific impact. And if you lose track on who is making this decision, is it already the algorithm or is it still a human being you can hold accountable for? That's a big topic of responsibility and ethics in the use of AI. Who is the final decision maker in crucial applications, in crucial decision points, I would say. Maybe one word about the relevance. I mean, I just had this week a big discussion with one of our major investors on responsible use of AI. The investors, I mean, the good investors, they see this as an investment risk and opportunity as well. So I assume this happens to all companies I spend at the moment. If I reflect, I mean, 6-7 years before, when I joined Novartis, it was all about our legacy compliance topics. How do we get over them and the compliance system? And today, it's basically if an investor roadshows and discussions on relevant risk topics, it's really what you said. You put the right focus on this, on AI. So it's a good reminder that the world and the investors and the stakeholders also have high expectations towards us.
A question around that then. If that was the past role, this is the current role, what do you think the future role of the chief compliance officer or even leaders within our organizations? Is it that final gatekeeper on the decision you were talking about, or is it wider? What do you think will happen?
It would already be good to have a seat at the table, I would say. I mean, decision makers, maybe it's difficult, but I think therefore I'm so much for this integrated assurance because there's more power behind than just if you go for a startup compliance approach. Decisions are made early, and if compliance and risk comes afterwards, it's often simply too late. You can mitigate to a certain way, but the decision is already taken. The big art, the big topic, and still there's so many colleagues in compliance are struggling. Do you have a seat at the table early enough in the planning phase when the big decisions are prepared? Can you give at least your advice? So we developed this kind of model of a business steward for ethics, risk, compliance professionals, which is definitely a good advice, but also someone who connects people in the company, connects different risk topics, and influences the third pillar. So it's business partner, it's business enterprise connector, and a good influencer. And this is the big value of an assurance function to get early involved, bring the right people to the table, influence decisions. If you say I'm the final decision maker, red tape, and you have to come to me, oof. So it requires much more talents and social skills and convincing skills for the future role to chief compliance officer, I would say.
It's just wonderful listening to you. I feel like the passion for this topic still emanates from you after all these years. What motivates you to keep pushing for these stronger ethical standards, a voice at the table, influencing in the way that you do?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has to look for what motivates you in your career, and um, I I got also good advice, of course, also during my career, which helped me. Um, Impact is definitely important, but as at the beginning of our wonderful conversation, Sarah, I came to the view, and this is more a view broad in compliance and corporate governance, that this we need for companies a new governance model, which I call integrated assurance. If we continue to go these siloed approaches, I saw it just failing. This will not work in our complex world. So bringing the people together, which is super interesting from a social skill point of view, from a kind of designing new structures. And then, of course, also the role of the boards, especially when you have a two-tier board like we have in many European countries, Germany, Switzerland. What is the role of the board in governing and overseeing the company? That's of huge interest, huge importance. I truly believe the role of the board, as a separate topic, maybe for a separate of your podcast, the role of the board and the influence on operational management will change, has to change. New capabilities in the boards, also for assurance, for AI. Um, these are fantastic topics to keep the industry and the business on a high level on assurance and ethics.
So, thinking back over so many achievements in your career already, and so much more to come, I know, what is the thing that you're currently most proud of that you've achieved? Cruel question.
Yeah, difficult. I mean, and I should add successes, yes, but also disappointments and failures. And if you don't have this, you are either not honest, or maybe your impact is a little bit not that big. Because to have impact, you have the scars, you have experienced what is not working, you have disappointments. To be honest, I I at the end, and this is a good advice for compliance officers as well. You have to like to work with people. If you rather prefer to sit in your office, if there's still an office, and to work it out yourself, don't go into this direction of leadership in companies and become a chief compliance or ethics officer or risk officer. And what I find fascinating and what motivates me a lot to see how people are growing and developing. And this can be inside your own company. This can be development outside the company to make their careers. If I look back at Siemens, if you allow me for a second, many of my colleagues in my former team are now chief compliance officers of companies. Wonderful to see this. Fascinating to see this, how the next generation is coming. And this is, I believe, that policies come and go, control setups can change, come and go, paper comes and go, but people development, people growing, this has an impact.
First-hand experience of how supportive you can be, so thank you for that. I'm afraid our time has come to an end, which is a shame because I'm so enjoying our conversation. But I have one last question to ask you, and it's a question I'm asking everyone that I interview. If you could create a leader's survival kit, Klaus, what would you put in it?
Oh, wow. So first of all, maybe a personal experience and maybe lesson for colleagues. In our roles, there are always surprises, you can't plan it. So when I was in the middle of the crisis back then at Siemens, I said, look, I try to reserve 5 to 10% of my time budget for topics which just I can't plan at the moment. Because if I give already 100% and something comes on top, I'm burned out immediately. So look at your own time budget and your power budget. And in these roles, which are often driven by ad hoc crises and topics, basically every day there's something which, right? And you notice from your many conversations and insights, it's so volatile. Try to reserve in your survival kit a space for you which you can leverage if it becomes even more. And second, to the extent you can influence this, but you can make sure that your context, your base camp, your environment is stable. This is your family, your friends, your partners, because you will need them, especially when it becomes dark and rainy. And you can't, I'm just facing at the moment a topic in my family where we have a disease appearing suddenly, and you can't plan this. And you know this, I know this from your own history, and you went through this as well. But try to make sure that your base camp is helping you to cope with all the challenges you are facing day to day. This is super important for the survival kit.
I couldn't agree more. I think as a leader, what I've seen from the leaders I've spoken to over many, many years is you are supporting so many other people. The responsibility of others' existence, their livelihoods is on your shoulders often. And yet what you don't often have is a support network of your own. So that's a wonderful last point to bring to the discussion, Klaus. I've so enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you, Sarah. A true pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of Insights from the Coalface, Elevating Leadership Beyond the Boardroom. I hope this conversation left you with fresh insights, new perspectives, and a deeper connection to the challenges and opportunities of leadership. If you found value in today's discussion, I'd love for you to share it with your network, leave a review, or reach out to me with your thoughts. Leadership can be a lonely road, but it doesn't have to be. Let's keep learning, growing, and supporting each other. Until next time, stay resilient, stay authentic, and keep leading with purpose.